Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel and thanks for logging on. Today, it's a battle of East meets West, and only the best will do. Audemars Piguet Royal Oak 2019, the 15500 versus the latest Grand Seiko Spring Drive Automatic Snowflake. Let the games begin. I should mention that this is a bit of a no comparison test in as much as the huge disparity in price and market positioning of these two watches would seem to augur against a favorable outcome for the Grand Seiko, but I look at it differently. With all the tech investment and fine finish that Grand Seiko has bestowed upon the Snowflake, Audemars Piguet had to earn its way onto this stage with a redesign of its mainstream Royal Oak for 2019, and that's exactly what we have right here. Reference 15500ST stainless steel, still a 41mm watch. This one bowed at SIHH with a few changes compared to the prior 15400. The watch, 41mm in stainless steel, wears large, as it always has. I tell people when sizing a Royal Oak, wear one size down compared to what you would normally buy, and on my 16cm circumference wrist, you can see that this 41 wears more like a 43. So if you normally wear a 41, get the 39. If you normally wear a 39, get a 37. And if you're thinking about a 42mm offshore, consider this 41mm standard Royal Oak self-winding. The watch is not thick, however. At a very agreeable 12.5mm with a sloped octagonal bezel, it will slide easily underneath the cuff. The watch is sort of a composite of two dominant shapes. There is the octagonal bezel, and then there's the broad sort of Robotunno 1970s cushion case. Zoom out a little bit, you can see the watch is very broad across my wrist. From lug to lug, this one measures 51mm, and if you were to include the solid outcropping that is the inflexible flare of the bracelet, you can't push those plots, the intermediate links, straight down, so you wind up with a true distance across the wrist of just over 53mm, so this is a large watch. Make no mistake though, it will easily fit underneath the cuff, so the best way to think of this watch is effectively a 43mm watch that wears flat. Now of course, because of the way the Royal Oak is put together, you won't be able to throw any old aftermarket strap on here. Aftermarket options are available, just remember they have to be compatible with the screw-fixed bar system that's used to join the bracelet to the case, and the bracelet is beautiful. It's massive, it's solid. It feels as confidence-inspiring as a Rolex bracelet, but with far more craft attention paid. This is a hand-finished component or series of components in its own right. Look at the diminishing bevel that shrinks at the mid-case and then flares at the lug hoods. Perfectly aligned, perfectly polished across the shoulders of the links. You can even see that the intermediate faces, these little plots between the main links, are polished inboard, so you can really only see that as you roll it through the light. So there's fine finish where you'll never even see it. Now there are plenty of gaps on the underside to avoid trapping wrist heat, sweat, moisture, and grip, or pulling wrist hair or pinching skin. So you'll have none of those issues. Screw fixed removable links, and then you've got a double deploying clasp with a twin trigger release system, and you'll note internally it's both frosted and satin finished, so there's some media blasting as well as satin finish. It is a sequential close, but thanks to the twin triggers, you will note that this is basically a foolproof clasp. It can't pop open unless you depress both triggers, giving you an extra measure of durability on the wrist, and the clasp and bracelet feel solid enough to be fit to an offshore. The case design, bezel design, everything is iconic and essentially unchanging since 1972. The bezel gasket just barely expressed as a hairline black sliver between the bezel and the case body. You can see that the character lines from the bezel through the mid-case through the case back are perfectly aligned. There is an array of satin and polish, and you can see the sharpest break is the satin vertical finish of the bezel top, giving way to the rounded polish of the flanks. Now since this is a Royal Oak and not an offshore, despite the imposing wrist presence, we're still dealing with white gold hexagonal bezel bolts slightly sunken into the bezel. We have a screw down crown, 6 sides, the hexagonal form referencing the bolts, and the dial, of course, a grande tapisserie, a large hobnail with a lovely intermediate pebbly texture across its hobnails and the wells between them. A redesigned dial for 2019. We have indices that end on an outboard minutes and seconds track. They no longer push all the way to the inner bezel. The seconds hand now features a skeletonized counterweight bob. No longer is the word automatic blazoned on the dial. No need to advertise the watch to the person who already owns it. I approve. A slightly bigger AP logo and a very clean dial overall with a handsome balance to it. The other change worth mentioning is that the index at 3 o'clock, the stub index, has been replaced by a larger and more legible date window. So that's what's changed on the dial side. We've got a new caliber on the back, caliber 4302, a manufacturer movement that is both larger than the old one one, and graced by a larger display case back, a higher beat rate, a longer power reserve. We'll talk about all that in a moment, but it's now 28.8, not 21.6, and it features a 70-hour power reserve, not the previous 60-hour power reserve. This is a movement designed for the future, and as you can see, with a free sprung balance and a full balance bridge, it's a sports watch architecture that's designed to share time in the offshores. So 50 meters water resistant, this one's swimmable, and as you can see, it's also loomed, but it's not quite as aggressively sporting as a 100-meter watch would be. And that's fine, because on the stage today, we have a 100-meter watch. Originally launched back in 2010, the Grand Seiko spring drive automatic SBGA211 gave way to the Grand Seiko dial variant you see right here in 2017. So this is the Snowflake SBGA211. Snowflake is no nickname. It is the official moniker bestowed upon this watch by the folks who created it in northern Japan. So whereas some watches feature that nickname, Tudor comes to mind, that is a proper phrasing of this watch's descriptor. This is officially the Snowflake. We'll talk about why that is in a moment, but you probably already know, and if you don't, you can see from the dial texture. The watch is also a 41, but in grade 5 titanium or something approximating it. Grand Seiko calls it high intensity, but the bright polish suggests that it is very much like a 6.4 alloy or grade 5 titanium. Feather light on the wrist, 41 millimeters in diameter. The watch is a bit chunkier than the Royal Oak at 12.7 millimeters thick, but if you just measure it lug to lug, it's also considerably more cropped across the wrist, measuring 48.7 lug to lug, and then if you include the solid end links, 52 millimeters. You'll note the banana-like form of the case also has excellent ergonomic properties, wrapping around the edge of your wrist. I can see this watch wearing well, even on the bracelet, on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference and maybe 13.5 if you wear it on a strap. It is a 20 millimeter lug spacing, in case you're wondering, so this is an easy watch to wear on the wrist, and because it features strap tool apertures in the lugs, it's a more natural match for a strap if you wish to switch it up. The bracelet is handsome and feather light in titanium with a lovely intermediate polishing and a rounded shoulder with satin finished flanks. You can see there's a small bevel on the side, not quite as artisanal as what you get on the Royal Oak, but still welcome. Here's where the Royal Oak really spreads its wings and stretches its margin of advantage. These pin sleeve systems here for retaining the lugs will require a punch and a block if you want to perform sizing, so a bit harder to size, though you will note Grand Seiko gives you half-size links, these intermediate links easing the incremental sizing. A twin trigger release system, but a single fold, not quite as friendly to a small wrist as the double fold on the Royal Oak. Jump into the case flank, you can see the legendary Zaratsu finish, executed with a Zalatz machine against a spinning tin plate. This is craft horology at its best. A black polish, mirror-like, on the flank of the case, executed by holding the case directly against a spinning tin wheel. You'll note satin for contrast and contours that are a bit more organic than the mechanistic Royal Oak with its angles and sharp creases. Screw-down crown, 100 meters water resistant, a minimalist bezel in contrast to the Royal Oak, and here you can really see why this one goes by Snowflake. The dial has a lovely, rusticated, flowing snowdrift appearance to it, and this is designed to evoke the northern Japan landscapes amid which this watch is designed, finished, assembled, and regulated. The dial features handcraft on a level that even the Royal Oak can't quite match, as at least 6 distinct steps are involved in the creation of this snowdrift dial, and then the hands, as well as the indices, the GS logo, and the frame for the date are hand-finished on diamond-tipped tools by artisans who just do this kind of micrometric finishing with faceting, black polish, and even fire bluing of the counterweighted steel Lancet-style seconds hand. Grand Seiko dial quality is best in the business. You have hacking seconds, you have a quickset for the date, and you have a power reserve for the 72-hour power reserve spring drive automatic system. This is the 9R65 72-hour automatic. You can see that it features a unidirectional governing wheel that uses induced electrical current and a back EMF to regulate the discharge of spring energy to the dial. Accurate to plus or minus 15 seconds a month or 1 second per day. It is a complete smooth sweep. So although the new high-beat Royal Oak is smooth, it is not perfectly smooth. This is no batteries, no capacitors, no motors. All of the energy comes from the spring system, but it has the accuracy of a quartz watch. So let's talk about advantages. Royal Oak first. A lot to love here. This is a timepiece that is timeless, that is iconic, that is immune to plan obsolescence, immune and inured to plan obsolescence. It is an icon not just of Audemars Piguet but of the industry. If you wanted to put together a monumental collection of iconic watches, you'd have a Speedmaster Professional, you'd have a Rolex Submariner, a Patek Nautilus or Calatrava, and you'd have this. This stands alongside the JLC Reverso as one of the all-timers. So in terms of lasting design quality, Vantage Royal Oak. It's also a thinner watch, easier to wear on the wrist or under a cuff. Not by a huge margin, but worth mentioning. The timepiece also has a huge advantage in warranty, as Audemars Piguet gives you 5 years to Grand Seiko's 3 years. Further, I should mention that this is a watch available in 4 dial colors. You can get the slate that you see here, you can get a straight silver, you can get blue, or you can get black. There is basically 1.5 dial colors with the Snowflake. There is a gold index model known as the Golden Snowflake, and then there's the model you see here. But in terms of pure dial redesign, Audemars Piguet gives you more flexibility with different colors. I'll also mention that this is a timepiece with a loomed dial, as well as a cleaner dial. It has a better symmetry about it. There's less clutter, there's less printing, there's no off-centered subsidiary complication as you have on the Grand Seiko. So between being legible at night and featuring a paucity of extraneous features and handsome balance, Vantage Royal Oak. Let's talk about the movement finish. Now the 4302 is still principally of mechanical finish as the 3120 before it was. That said, you get a much larger display case back, not just than the 3120 15400, but also compared to the Grand Seiko. And there is more hand finishing here than on the Grand Seiko movement, as well as flat out more attractive finishing. If you look at the display case back of the Grand Seiko, you can see that it's rather constricted. There's not a whole lot to see, and the finishing is mechanical and basic at best. So in terms of both movement, architecture, and finish, you simply see more of a more pleasing vista when you look at the back of the Royal Oak. This feels closer to crafterology under the case back. The bracelet is superior in almost every way, superior in artisanal finish, in feel and solidity. It's superior in clasp quality. It's superior in its anchoring to the case using screws and bars rather than spring bar pins as on the Grand Seiko. So this is just more secure, more substantial, more beautifully finished, and ultimately, if you want to size it, you have screws to do so. You can do this with a screwdriver at home rather than risking your talents with a punch and a block. So a better bracelet, a better clasp, and a better junction system with the lug. I would also say this is the one to buy new, as it retails for $19,200. It sells pre-owned for about $25,000 to $26,000. So right now, if you want to buy this watch, own it for a year, and sell it, you'll probably pay nothing to do so, and you might even come out ahead. Plus, with the 5-year warranty, this is the one to buy new. Alright, let's talk about the Grand Seiko. Many advantages here, some of them technological, some of them aesthetic, some of them emotional. Let's talk about the better fit. It's a lighter watch, all in titanium. It wears more easily on the wrist than does the Royal Oak. It's also shorter lug-to-lug and shorter end-link to end-link than the Royal Oak is on the wrist. So if you have a wrist under 15 centimeters circumference, this is going to be the one you want to wear. The Royal Oak is going to be borderline for you, and this is going to be a nice tight fit. Let's talk about the adaptability to straps. Sure, you can get an aftermarket strap or a Audemars Piguet strap for the Royal Oak, but you are going to pay a premium for the privilege because it's not designed to take standard size straps. Here you have both strap tool aperture and a standard 20mm lug spacing, so Vantage Grand Seiko. Do you like complications? Vantage Grand Seiko. You get a dial side power reserve. Do you want water resistance? Both of these watches are swimmable. 50 meters with a screw down, 100 meters with a screw down, but 100 meters gives you more security as well as margin for error if you do fall off that jet ski or just perhaps venture a bit too low while scuba diving. Plus, as the watch ages and the water resistance ebbs, this one will have more margin for error. After 2 or 3 years, maybe this becomes a 50-meter watch, and this becomes more like a 20-meter watch. Vantage Grand Seiko. Let's talk about the dial. It's a masterpiece of design and craft, and while the traditional pantograph cut tapisserie, Grand tapisserie of the Royal Oak is artisanal and archaic in its creation, and both of these make it beautiful, I have to say that the more inventive dial and easily the more famous dial in the industry is the Snowflake, because this is one of the rare dials that is brand defining, and in that regard I place it alongside the likes of the FP Journe Chronomètre Bleu as a dial that simply defines the brand itself. But you'll also appreciate the level of finish that is bestowed on the hands as well as the dial furniture, which at close range is superior to what you get on the AP. Let's talk about precision. Plus or minus 1 second a day, 15 seconds per month, Advantage spring drive, and it's not even close. No wait list, let's remember. No wait list to get this watch at dealers and no markups. You can buy it from a dealer on demand for $5,800, its retail price. Its resale price, I should mention, also makes it a better value, as it holds its value relatively well, but for $5 to $5.5 grand, you can pick this one up pre-owned right now. And it has a big underdog appeal, as Grand Seiko is a small brand internationally, and it doesn't have the patrician hauteur that you get with one of the Holy Trinity and Audemars Piguet. So the watch is both an appealing underdog, a scrappy one at that, and unpretentious, whereas this is a watch that begs to be seen, and it conveys a certain status and stature while projecting an image that not everyone wishes to project. So on that basis, Advantage, Grand Seiko. Which one do I prefer? I am all about the Snowflake. I love rooting for an underdog, especially when the Advantage includes artisanal beauty and technological advantages. Add the value, add the water resistance, and for me, this is an easy choice. Grans Seiko Snowflake, though Audemars Piguet has never been closer, never been more in the hunt than it is with the new 15500. Guys, you let me know, which of these watches, lume or no lume, water resistance or less water resistance, is your choice.